It started as a normal evening, dinner, a casual conversation, and then a single sentence that turned my world upside down. What she said left me frozen, unsure if I'd heard her right. And when the truth hit me, it felt like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. Driven by anger, confusion, and a need to make sense of it all, I made a choice that night, one I never thought I'd make. A choice that set off a chain of events more devastating than I ever imagined. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about the lengths we go to when we feel hurt, the lines we cross in anger, and the aftermath of actions we can't take back. This story might be a little different from what you usually read here. I know there's no shortage of tales about betrayal, people getting blindsided by someone they thought they could trust. But my story? It's not quite the same. See, I wasn't just the one who got hurt in the end. I played my part in the mess too. But before you jump to conclusions and think I'm just another bad guy in this kind of story, hear me out. I didn't get here on my own. I was pushed, pulled, and, honestly, practically shoved into doing what I did. It's not that I'm innocent, but it's not entirely my fault either. Let's rewind a bit, though. We've got to start somewhere, right? A little context goes a long way before diving into the chaos. First off, I'm just a regular guy. No hero, no villain, just someone trying to make life work. I've got a job that pays the bills, and I've always aimed to keep things steady and simple. That's just who I am, the predictable, steady guy. My name doesn't really matter, but for the sake of the story, let's talk about my wife. Her name's Lisa, and trust me, she's a whole different story. Lisa's the kind of woman people notice. She has this presence. She could walk into a room, and it didn't matter who was there, everyone would turn their heads. It wasn't just about looks, though Lisa is beautiful. It was more about her. The way she carried herself, her energy, her confidence. She was sharp, quick-witted, and could hold her own in any conversation. People loved being around her. It was like she had this magnetism that drew everyone in. I remember when we first met. I was floored by how easy she made everything seem. Life just seemed to bend in her favor. She was funny, charming, and had this laugh, an infectious, full-body kind of laugh that could make even your worst day feel a little brighter. And her humor? That was something else entirely. Lisa could roast you to ashes with one line, but somehow, you'd still end up laughing along with her. It was like a magic trick. Everyone adored her for it, our friends, her family, even my buddies. And in the beginning, I was no exception. I was as charmed as everyone else. I fell for her hard, drawn in by everything that made her Lisa. But over time, well, things changed. That sharp humor, the quick-wittedness I used to admire. It started to feel different. It wasn't so fun when the jokes always seemed to land on me. The same things that used to make me laugh began to wear me down. It's hard to laugh along when you're always the punchline, you know. Lisa was always the funny one in our relationship. Me? Not so much. I was the serious guy, the one who made sure everything stayed on track, grounded, and running smoothly. For a while, that dynamic worked. She brought the spark, the energy that lit up our lives, and I was the one who kept the fire from spreading too far. But her humor, the very thing that had drawn me to her, eventually turned on me. It played a cruel joke, a joke so twisted and brutal that if I hadn't lived through it myself, I wouldn't have believed it. You probably won't believe it either, not until you hear what happened. It started out like any other evening. Nothing special. I'd come home from work, exhausted from the grind, the daily routine wearing on me like it does for everyone. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. That's life, right? But that night was different, though I didn't realize it at first. When I walked through the door, the house felt warm. Inviting. The smell of dinner hit me as soon as I stepped in, something Italian, I think. Lisa knew I loved pasta, and she'd often whip it up on nights when she was in a good mood. The candles were lit, she always had a flair for atmosphere, like something out of a movie scene. And there she was, sitting at the table with that radiant smile, looking for all the world like everything was perfect. We sat down to eat, just like always. We talked about the usual stuff, how her day went, how mine was. At one point, I said something dumb, and she laughed that laugh of hers. The kind that could make you forget the world was ever anything but good. I remember thinking, in that moment, that everything was fine. Completely fine. But as we kept talking, something in the air shifted. It was subtle at first, so subtle I almost missed it. The way her voice softened, the way her posture changed as she leaned back in her chair. Her eyes narrowed, watching me in a way that felt off. Then, out of nowhere, she hit me with it. You know, she started, her tone so casual you'd think she was commenting on the weather, I've been feeling a little tired of us lately. Her words stopped me cold. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth, blinking like I'd misheard her. Tired? I repeated. What do you mean, tired? She let out a sigh, one of those heavy ones that made it seem like what she was about to say was the most normal thing in the world. I don't know, she said, shrugging a little. It's just, things feel stale. Like we're stuck, you know. I didn't see it coming. Not even a little. There was no warning, no tension, no signs that we were unraveling. We weren't fighting. We weren't in some deep rut, at least not that I could see. Sure, we had our routines, but I thought we were solid. 7 years of marriage, and I figured we had it mostly figured out. But I was wrong. So unbelievably wrong. And then she said it. The words that changed everything. I slept with someone. She said it so plainly, so matter-of-factly, like she was telling me she'd bought a new pair of shoes or decided to try a different shade of lipstick. It made me feel better, she added, her tone so casual it felt like a slap to the face. But don't worry, I'm not going to do it again. I couldn't process it. My brain just stopped. It was like all the sound in the world cut out, leaving only the deafening echo of her words. They hung in the air, heavy and surreal, like some cruel joke I hadn't caught on to yet. Did she just say that? Did she just tell me she'd cheated on me over dinner? Casually. Like it was nothing. I felt my mouth go dry. My hand tightened around my fork, the cool metal bending under the force of my grip, but I didn't care. I stared at her, trying to find any hint that this was a joke, one of her twisted pranks. But her eyes, they gave me nothing. Just cold indifference, like she'd just read me the weather forecast. And then, as if she hadn't just destroyed everything we'd built, she stood up, leaned over, and kissed me on the lips, a quick, meaningless gesture. Good night, she said softly, like it was any other evening, and then she turned and walked to the bedroom. I just sat there, frozen. I couldn't move. I couldn't even think straight. I glanced down at my hands and realized I'd bent the fork clean in half. My chest was tight, and every nerve in my body felt like it was on fire. Rage started to fill me, taking over, consuming every part of me. But instead of storming after her, instead of demanding answers, I stayed where I was, my fists clenched, my thoughts spinning around one singular idea, revenge. She thought she could just drop a bomb like that, kiss me, and go to bed as if nothing happened. As if I wasn't supposed to react. Oh, I'd react, all right. I'd make her regret ever opening her mouth. But how was I supposed to know it was all just a joke? How was I supposed to know her twisted sense of humor would push things this far? When Lisa kissed me on the lips and sauntered off to the bedroom, like she hadn't just shattered my entire world, I felt a surge of anger like nothing I'd ever experienced before. It was white-hot, searing through me. There was no way I could just sit there and let it fester, not with my thoughts spiraling the way they were. Without a second thought, I grabbed my jacket, threw it on, and walked out the door. I needed air. Space. Something to help me think clearly, because staying in that house felt impossible. But more than that, I needed someone to talk to. My first instinct was to call my best friend, the guy I'd always turned to when life got messy. My thumb hovered over his name in my contacts, ready to hit call. But then I paused. My eyes fell on another name. Megan. Megan wasn't just one of Lisa's friends. I'd known her long before I ever met my wife. We used to run in the same circles back in the day, and, if I'm being completely honest, there'd always been something between us. Nothing serious, just this unspoken connection. Timing was never on our side, though, and by the time Lisa and I became a thing, any chance with Megan had faded into the background. At least, I thought it had. Deep down, I suspected her feelings hadn't completely gone away. Maybe mine hadn't either. Before I could talk myself out of it, I tapped on her name and hit call. She answered after a couple of rings, her voice casual but tinged with curiosity. "Hey, what's up? It's been a while." "I need to talk," I blurted out, the words spilling out before I could second-guess them. "Can you meet me at the bar near your place?" There was a pause, just long enough to make me think she'd say no, but then she answered, calm and easy. "Sure. I'll be there in 10. She didn't ask any questions. No grilling me about why I was calling her out of the blue or what was wrong. She just agreed, like she already knew something wasn't right. I jumped in my car and headed to the bar, my thoughts a jumbled mess. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, I still didn't know exactly what I was going to say. But when I walked in, I spotted her immediately. Megan was already seated at a booth near the back, nursing a drink. She looked up as I approached, her eyebrows lifting slightly in surprise. "Where's Lisa?" she asked. I slid into the booth across from Megan, ignoring her question at first. "She's not coming," I said flatly, avoiding her gaze. That got her attention. Her casual expression shifted to concern as she leaned in slightly. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." The bartender came by, and we ordered a couple of drinks. I could feel Megan's eyes on me, waiting, but I wasn't ready to speak just yet. It wasn't until the alcohol started working its way through my system that the words finally spilled out. I told her everything, what Lisa had said, how she casually confessed to cheating on me, and how she acted like it was nothing more than a passing comment. As I spoke, I saw the disbelief in Megan's eyes. At first, she didn't believe me. Who would? But the more I talked, the more she realized I wasn't lying. I could see it click in her head as she pieced everything together. We kept drinking, the conversation getting heavier with each round. The alcohol dulled the sharp edges of my anger, but the rage didn't disappear. It stayed there, simmering just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to boil over. By the time the bartender announced last call, we were both drunk, too deep into the conversation to stop. That's when Megan leaned in closer, her voice softer, her tone inviting. "I've got another bottle of wine back at my place," she said. "If you want to keep this going." I didn't hesitate. I nodded, and we left the bar together. Megan's apartment was only a short walk away, and we stumbled in, laughing about something I couldn't even remember later. It felt strange, surreal, almost, to be there with her, but I didn't dwell on it. When she uncorked that bottle of wine, I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly where the night was headed. There was this intensity in her eyes, a kind of unspoken understanding between us. And I didn't stop it. I didn't want to. It happened fast. 1 minute, we were sitting on her couch, talking. The next, we were tangled together, hands everywhere, lips locked in a frenzy of emotion and desire. And then, in a moment of impulse, I did something I hadn't planned on at all. I pulled out my phone and started filming. Not the whole thing, just a few clips here and there. Megan noticed almost immediately. She pulled back, her voice slightly slurred but still firm. "What are you doing?" she asked, pushing my hand away. It's just for me, I said quickly, trying to reassure her. No one else will ever see it. I promise. She hesitated, her eyes searching mine for a sign of sincerity. Alcohol, unresolved feelings, and the heat of the moment won out in the end, and she gave in. Fine, she murmured, relaxing again. I kept the camera rolling for a while, capturing just enough to satisfy the twisted part of me that thought this was a good idea. But when it was over, when the adrenaline and anger began to fade, I felt the weight of what I'd done pressing down on me. I sat up and told her I had to leave. Megan looked at me, disappointment flashing across her face. You're leaving? She asked, a hint of hurt in her voice. Yeah, I said, already on my feet. I should go. It's late. She wanted me to stay. I could see it in her eyes, but I couldn't. Not after everything that had just happened. I could tell Megan wanted me to stay, but there was no chance I was spending the night in her bed. This wasn't going to become a regular thing, and I wasn't about to complicate my life any more than it already was. So I left. I called a taxi, and as I sat in the back seat, the events of the night began to settle in. My head was spinning, partly from the booze, partly from the adrenaline, but mostly from the strange mix of emotions coursing through me. Satisfaction and guilt, side by side. I'd done it. I'd taken my revenge. But had it made me feel better? Not really. If anything, I felt hollow, like I'd filled a temporary void with something I knew wouldn't last. It didn't fix anything. It didn't even come close. When I got home, the house was dark. Lisa was probably asleep in the bedroom, blissfully unaware of what had just happened. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, trying to process everything. Then, without a word, I headed to the couch and crashed there for the night. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Lisa moving around in the kitchen. My body ached from sleeping on the couch, and my mind was still a foggy mess. When I walked into the kitchen, she was sitting at the table, a cup of coffee in hand. She didn't look up as I entered, but I could feel the tension in the air. She wasn't yelling or slamming things around, no, this was the quieter kind of anger, the low simmer where you know someone's just waiting for the right moment to let it all out. I sat down across from her, pretending not to notice the way her eyes were practically boring into the back of my head. For a few minutes, we ate in silence. But eventually, she spoke, her voice heavy with irritation. So, she said, dragging the word out, where the hell were you last night? I needed some air, I replied, keeping my tone even. She scoffed, setting her mug down a little too hard. Some air. All night? You expect me to believe that? I didn't answer right away, letting the tension hang there for a moment. Then, I finally spoke, my tone calm but pointed. I needed to think. She raised an eyebrow, the irritation in her voice giving way to suspicion. Think about what? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you were up to something. I glanced at her, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of my mouth. Yeah, I said evenly. I was thinking about us. About how I'm a little tired of our relationship too. That caught her off guard. Her expression shifted from anger to confusion as she blinked a few times, furrowing her brow. Wait, what? You're tired? Since when? I shrugged, keeping my voice casual, even though we both knew this was far from casual. For a while, I guess. Her confusion turned into a short, humorless laugh. Oh, come on, she said, rolling her eyes. You're joking. What is this? Your way of getting back at me for what I said last night. I didn't break eye contact. I'm not joking, Lisa. I cheated on you. Her smile faltered, but only for a second. She leaned back in her chair, her tone shifting to disbelief. Sure you did. With who? The waitress at the bar. Some random girl from work. I took a deep breath, knowing exactly what this next part would do to her. "No," I said, my voice steady. "Not some random girl. It was with Megan. That did it." Whatever smirk Lisa had been holding on to vanished in an instant, replaced by a look of disbelief. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and held it up for her to see. At first, she just stared at the screen, still convinced this was some kind of elaborate prank. But as the video began to play, and Megan's face appeared, her smile started to falter. Then the sound kicked in, our voices, the unmistakable noise of what had happened. Lisa's expression crumbled. Her face went pale, her eyes widening in shock. Her hand shot up to her mouth as if trying to hold back a scream. And then, without warning, she smacked the phone out of my hand with enough force to send it clattering to the floor. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she yelled, her voice shaking. She threw her hands up in frustration and began pacing around the kitchen like she was about to explode. "What are you even talking about?" I stared at her, confused. "I told you, I cheated." She stopped in her tracks, glaring at me. "You idiot," she hissed. "I was joking. I didn't sleep with anyone. I was going to tell you once you'd cooled down, but you stormed out of the house like a lunatic before I could explain." The room spun. My mind struggled to keep up with what she was saying. "A joke?" I stammered. "Yes," she screamed, tears welling up in her eyes. "I was joking. I never cheated." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Lisa was crying now, her voice cracking as she spoke. "You ruined everything," she choked out. You slept with my best friend. How am I supposed to forgive that?" I had no words. None. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Finally, I managed to say, "I didn't know." The words sounded weak and hollow, even to me. "You didn't know?" she shot back, shaking her head in disbelief. "How does that change anything? You still did it." Her voice broke, and she took a step back from me, tears streaming down her face. "Just go. I don't want to see you right now." With that, she stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door so hard the walls seemed to shake. I heard the lock click, and just like that, I was shut out completely. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the door, my mind replaying everything that had just happened. How had it come to this? How had a stupid joke spiraled into the destruction of everything we'd built? The guilt was unbearable, but a part of me still felt angry that she'd made the joke in the first place, that she'd pushed me to this breaking point. Eventually, I grabbed my jacket again and headed out the door. This time, I went straight to Megan's place. When she opened the door, her face lit up for a split second before she noticed the look on mine. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I didn't waste time with small talk. I told her everything, from the moment Lisa confessed her so-called joke to the moment I showed her the video. As I spoke, Megan's expression shifted, the light in her eyes dimming with every word. I watched Megan's face twist from confusion to fury, her eyes blazing as she spat out her words. "You're an absolute idiot," she snapped. "You destroyed your marriage and my friendship, all because of you." I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm, but her words stung. "It's not just my fault, Megan," I shot back. "You were there. You knew what you were doing. You're just as guilty as I am." She stopped mid-step and turned to glare at me, her expression sharp enough to cut. "You really are a piece of work, you know that," she said, her voice dripping with bitterness. "I've loved you since university. And this? This is how you repay me? By dragging me into this mess and ruining my life?" Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd had no idea she still felt that way, not like that, not after all these years. For a brief moment, the anger between us seemed to dissipate, replaced by something heavier. Regret? Guilt? Whatever it was, it felt suffocating, like a weight I couldn't shake. But no matter how much I wanted to fix things, I couldn't. Not here. Not now. After a while I left Megan's place. My head was spinning, my chest tight as I drove back home, hoping, somehow, to find a way to make things right with Lisa. I needed to apologize, to explain, to try to salvage what was left of us. When I walked through the door, she was sitting in the living room, her back straight, her expression unreadable. She didn't even look at me. "I already called a lawyer," she said, her voice cold and detached. "I'm filing for divorce." The words hit me like a truck. My stomach sank, and it felt like the ground beneath me had given way. I was free falling, with no end in sight. "Lisa, please," I started, my voice barely above a whisper. But she cut me off, standing abruptly. Her eyes finally met mine, but there was nothing left in them, no warmth, no anger, just a hollow frustration that made my chest ache. "I don't want to hear it," she said firmly, crossing her arms. This is too much." I didn't know what else to say. I couldn't blame her for feeling this way. But as I turned to leave, defeated, her voice stopped me. "Wait," she said, softer this time. I turned back, hesitant. She sighed and ran a hand through her hair, her expression faltering. "Fine. You can stay," she said reluctantly. "But just for a little while. It's a lot. I need space to think." It wasn't the answer I'd hoped for, but it was better than nothing. So I stayed. The divorce process was brutal, dragging on for about a month, and during that time, my entire social world seemed to collapse. Our friends didn't know how to handle the fallout, and it felt like there was this gaping void between Lisa and me. I tried to talk to her, to fix things, but the distance between us was insurmountable. As for Megan, things were different now. She let me crash at her place after the split, but there was this unshakable tension between us. Sure, she still had feelings for me, she admitted as much, but those feelings were poisoned now. Tainted by everything that had happened. I felt it too. We tried to act like things were normal, like maybe we could move forward, but it never worked. Every conversation, every glance, carried the weight of what we'd done. And deep down, I knew, nothing would ever be the same. Every time I looked at Megan, the guilt was there, gnawing at me. It wasn't just mine, it was hers too. I could see it in the way her smiles never quite reached her eyes, the way her laugh sounded hollow, forced, like she was trying to convince herself this was okay. But deep down, we both knew it wasn't. I was trapped in this strange limbo, unable to move forward and too ashamed to go back. Megan and I tried to make it work for a while. We had history, after all, and for a fleeting moment, it felt like maybe we could turn all this chaos into something meaningful. But the truth? It just wasn't right. We were each other's crutch during a time when everything was falling apart, but that's all it ever really was, a way to lean on someone when the weight became too much. And you know what finally broke us? It wasn't some dramatic fight or even our own doubts. It was everyone else. The judgment from our so-called friends, the whispers, the opinions that hovered over us like a storm cloud, it was suffocating. Every look, every comment, reminded us of what we'd done and who we'd hurt. In the end, we both knew we couldn't keep living under that weight. So we let it go. Quietly. No yelling, no dramatic breakup, just a mutual understanding that this wasn't working and probably never would. We walked away for the sake of both our sanity. Now, I'm in a different place, literally and figuratively. I made the decision to leave town, to pack up my things and get away from all the memories, all the people who wouldn't let me forget. It was strange, saying goodbye to everything familiar, but it felt like the right move. Like I needed a fresh start, away from the mess I'd made and the ghosts that haunted me. And here I am, settled into a new city. It's strange how quickly life can shift when you decide to leave the past behind. I found a job not long after moving, something simple, just office work with a bit of project management on the side. It's steady, nothing glamorous, but honestly, the normalcy is a relief. I clock in, do my job, and clock out. No drama. No emotional baggage spilling into every corner of my day. For the first time in a long time, I can breathe. But even now, the past lingers. I haven't put myself out there, not really. How could I? I'm still carrying so much guilt, so much regret. The divorce, the fallout with Megan, it's all still there, weighing me down, sitting in the back of my mind like an unwelcome guest. Part of me wants to try again, to open myself up to the possibility of something new. But another part, the bigger part, feels like I don't deserve it. Not yet. I know I need to make peace with everything that's happened before I can even think about truly moving forward with someone else. Until I do, I'm stuck in this strange limbo, trying to figure out how to let go of the guilt and regret. There's someone, though. Her name's Anna. She's a coworker, and I really like her. But every time I think about telling her how I feel, I freeze. There's this voice in the back of my head reminding me of everything I've done, everything I've been through. Still, there's a part of me that hopes I can make something good out of all of this mess. Update. It feels like the right time to give you all an update, and this one's a bit more hopeful than the last. I'm in a relationship now. With Anna. It's going better than I ever expected, honestly. I didn't rush into it. I knew I needed to take my time, to make sure I was ready for something new. I've been working with a psychologist for a while now, putting in the effort to sort through the mess of emotions and heartbreak from the past few years. It hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. One thing that hasn't changed, though, I still haven't developed much of a sense of humor. Maybe that's just not in the cards for me. But I've learned to live with it. Anna and I laugh about it sometimes, actually, because she's got this lightness to her that I've always admired. It's the kind of energy I've needed in my life, and maybe that's enough for both of us. I just wanted to share where I'm at now, to let you know that things are finally looking up. I'm in a better place, mentally, emotionally, and it feels good to finally say that. Looking back now, it's hard to believe how much my life has changed in such a short time. I'm not just talking about moving cities or starting a new relationship, though those things are part of it. No, it's the internal shift that's been the most unexpected, the hardest fought. When I met Anna, I wasn't sure if I could let her in. I carried too much weight from the past, baggage that I wasn't even sure I'd ever unpack. But Anna, with her kindness and understanding, helped me find a new rhythm. She reminded me that it's okay to laugh, even after life's hit you with its hardest punches. Still, the journey hasn't been without its challenges. There was a moment, early on, when I thought about walking away. We'd been out for coffee, and a familiar face from my old life walked in, one of the friends who'd been there during the fallout with Lisa and Megan. They didn't say anything, just gave me a look. But that look, full of judgment and pity, made my stomach churn. Later that night, I almost ended things with Anna. I told her she didn't deserve to be dragged into my mess, that she should be with someone who had less history. She didn't accept that. "You're not your past," she told me, her voice steady. "And I'm not afraid of it. But if you keep running from it, you'll never outrun yourself." That hit me harder than I expected. For the first time, I realized that moving cities, changing jobs, even starting therapy, none of it would matter if I kept holding on to the guilt like a shield. So I stopped running. I finally reached out to Lisa, not to ask for forgiveness, I knew I didn't deserve that, but to apologize. Properly. I don't know what I expected, but when she responded, her words surprised me. "I'm not ready to forgive you yet, and maybe I never will. But I appreciate the effort. We both made mistakes, and I hope you find peace." It wasn't closure in the traditional sense, but it was something. And it was enough to let me move forward without looking over my shoulder. Now, as I sit here writing this, I'm struck by how far I've come. Life isn't perfect, it never is, but for the first time in years, I feel like I'm on solid ground. Anna and I are building something together, something that feels real and unburdened by the past. And as for the rest? Well, I've learned that some things will always linger. The guilt, the regret, they don't just disappear. But they don't have to define me either. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: you can't rewrite the past, but you can decide what comes next. And for the first time in a long time, I'm ready to write a better story.